Welcome. This is Richard Clarke with
And
Hot
let's
Science, with the week's top news in science, technology, and medicine. Welcome. And hello there, Andrew.
Hello. Is everybody doing their soleus exercises?
Well, we just have a small group today. Only the people that matter.
I sent that soleus exercise to my siblings, and one of them wrote back, obviously she had not read it, wrote back and said, well, if you'll buy it for me and guarantee that it'll work, I'll do it. I wrote back and said, it's free. I'll buy it for you because it's free. You already have it. And the science is behind it. So do it. So she looked at the article and thought it looked like just another advertisement.
Uh-huh.
I straightened her out on that.
Well,
I wonder if restless leg syndrome is just as good, if you.
Oh, that's right. That's putting the restless leg syndrome to good use. Okay, let me go through and review the stories we have this week. The story I have is the top story is a report saying the cost of electric cars is going to reach parity by 2025 to 2026. And by what they mean by the cost is the manufacturing cost, and therefore the purchase price will be the same for EVs as for gas engine cars. And since EVs have lower operating costs, the total cost of ownership will be lower. Then in technology, Elon Musk had another big announcement where he was showing off his robot. And I have video not only of his robot, but also the Boston Dynamics robot. And you tell me which one you think is better. In the environment, they say there is hope amidst the climate chaos, that we're in a race between Armageddon and awesome. I have this article because that's what I think anyway. So I might as well have something that says what I think. Then in space flight, we have the NASA testing a gigantic slingshot for hurling objects into space. And it's pretty cool. It can get things, the plans are to be able to put things 440 miles into space. So it's near Earth. And in biology, I have an article defending Earth's terrestrial microbiome. We've been hearing a lot about the human microbiome. They are saying the planet has a microbiome too. And the microbiome was there before humans were, and it's likely it'll be there after humans aren't here anymore. Unless we all vanished due to the sun blowing up a few million years in the future. Then in human stories, I have a couple of stories. One is that the US ultra rich justify their low tax rates with three myths. None of them are correct. And a story I think that is related, which is new analysis show that immigrants provide a huge benefit to the US. So fighting to keep immigrants out is actually damaging the US and costs money. And then in health, two stories. One is that, we now with COVID-19 have started to get home testing for COVID-19. And that has been successful enough that there are a number of companies that are introducing or have introduced other home tests for other problems. And so that's going to be a clear trend that is happening in medicine. And I think that is, it is the COVID home testing that really opened the doors for that. But now there are many more tests that are in development. And then the last story is not necessarily the kind of story that we want to hear, but it's the kind of story that we need to hear. And it turns out end of life planning with loved ones can be hard, but it turns out it's an important thing to do. I know several years ago, I did a program here called Aging to Saging. And and that's for, the old people living lakeside. There are people who retire here and figure out what their life is going to be here. And it was for people helping to deal with those kind of issues. And one of the things that I had to tell them in this program was, you're going to die. That was an important block of the program, but it wasn't the most popular. So here we go. Let me go on now with the story. The top story is about the parity for EVs. And so Envision, a big organization, I don't really know who they are, but they are saying the cost of making electric cars will reach parity with internal combustion cars by 2025 or 2026. That's pretty soon. And this means that it will soon become more expensive to manufacture traditional cars than EVs. One of the things that is happening in these manufacturing costs is EVs, because of manufacturing scale of the cars and of the components, the cost to make them are continuing to decline. And as the volumes decrease for the internal combustion cars, the cost of making them continues to be higher. It makes sense to me that EVs would be cheaper to manufacture because they are so much simpler and have so much a lower parts count. And with the sticker price parity between the two, it means the total cost of ownership for EVs will be lower. And this is the tipping point. At this point, buying an internal combustion car is a bad idea because the uh, resale value of the car is going to start dropping. So uh, the change is coming. And to give you an idea how fast it's coming, last year, EVs accounted for less than 8% of the global car sales. By 2028, 6 years from now, the forecasts say that there'll be 33%. So the sales rate is going to double and then double again and then increase some more in just the next 6 years. This is an example of the kind of exponential change that is coming. And, we're to the place, if you've seen these adoption curves, there's a long tail where not very much happens. Then they start to bend up. Then they start to get steep. We're at the place where it's bent up and we're ready to go into the steep part of the adoption curve. And that looks like it's really is in the next few years. So change is coming.
Well, our EVs may make sense as a second car for a two-car family, and the EV is used for local trips. But range anxiety is still a big issue
Right.
with a lot of people.
You're
And
certainly right.
for a one-car family, a hybrid is more practical.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, if you had a situation like Florida right now with a 2-week electrical outage, people with an EV would be really marooned.
Right.
And so that's something to think about too, if we're moving into a future of less reliable electrical supplies and things like that, something to think about. But I saw something that said that the real future for the real immediate future for EVs is in delivery vehicles and vehicles for local businesses like
Mhm.
plumbers and utilities and Amazon delivery trucks and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So be
That
interesting to see.
there is development going on in those kind of vehicles, but and we're seeing some of them being released, but where the manufacturers are focused is still the private car.
Yeah.
And there are many of those coming out, and there are just a few of the trucks. But certainly the case for having the electric delivery vehicles and buses and things like that is a very strong case. And uh, if they're just things that are running in town, or trucks have a route, and so the problem with charging and recharging and range anxiety goes down for the trucks, especially if they're on a given route, where you can have charging facilities as a part of the route.
Or public transit.
Right. That.
Tesla has charging stations all over the place. So I went on a 2,000-mile round trip in my Tesla, and yeah, there is a little anxiety, but the biggest anxiety is coming to a Tesla supercharging station and finding they're all filled up with people charging.
Uh-huh.
And it does take 20 minutes or so to charge. You got to have something to do. But I want to, in a couple of articles from here, the one on climate, they actually have a term in there that I hadn't heard before, and I'm hearing it more and more. And it's called the Ev Runaway Takeover. And it's taking over. Like your article says, it will be. There's already a waiting list that's unbelievable. But Tesla is having problems with the demand. It can't supply the cars, all of them. And I've looked at every EV company, and all of them have the same problem. But in a couple of years, production's going to be up, and they're calling it an EV runaway, a takeover of the market by EVs in just a couple of years.
Well, automobiles certainly took over from horses pretty quickly, so, you know.
Right.
But they still talk a lot about the supply chain problems with the
Right.
batteries and things like that, so.
Well, it's not just batteries. If you look at, there's this whole infrastructure that supports the automotive industry, and that's going to go through immense changes in the next 10 years. And that's going to have whole industries dying, not just companies, but industries dying, and it's going to affect the jobs of, I think, a few million people. So it's not a small deal.
Yeah, they used to say that in the US, the automotive industry employed 1 out of every 7 people, either directly in the manufacturer or in all of the support works that go with cars.
Now, these changes that have happened before, my great grandfather went into Dallas, Texas in 1913. He drove from Illinois in his wagon, and his wagon was a fix-it wagon. And when he went into Dallas, he opened his first shop, which was a harness repair shop. And that was the wrong business to get into in 1913. And so by a few years later, he had a gas station. And, here I got to see some of these changes in my own family. So now we have the next generation.
And if it happens as quickly as this article suggests, even we'll get to see it in spite of your final article on.
Right. Well, it makes me think, what I had thought a couple of years ago is that, we don't have a lot of money. I drive an old Honda now, and I figure I'll never have an EV, but if the EVs really go on, then maybe in 10 years I can afford a used one.
Well, Chad, is the Tesla your only car, or is it your second or third car?
It's our only car. But when you're retired, we don't do much. Go out to the beach once in a while. It's a 10, 20 miles round trip. Go grocery shopping, go movies, go restaurants. Only occasionally, maybe once or twice a year, we might have a significant trip. So far, it hasn't been a problem. The range in the Tesla is about 250, and they have some now that are up to 500. I think the Lucid is the biggest one, but you're getting into the $100,000 car, and little too steep for me.
Well, anyway, I just need to have used ones for $5,000. Then I can have mine.
I think like I reported a while back, we found out that a used one was more expensive than a new one, because you could get a used one, you couldn't get a new one.
Right. Okay. So availability struck the market.
Supply and demand. Yeah.
Anyway, interesting. Okay, the next story, technology story, is another. You were talking about Tesla. It's another Elon Musk story. And Elon Musk, some people say uh, he shows signs of being a showman and that he releases things sooner that they should release. So he uh, showed his new robot. The Optimus is his name. Is the Optimus humanoid robot. He actually showed two of them. One of them uh, was able to walk out on the screen, and I have on the stage. I have a video of it. He had the next one. They actually carried it out to the stage because they were afraid it would fall over. So it's still fairly early in the development. And what I want to show is, we have Boston Dynamics, who's been doing a great job of developing robots. And I want to show the Boston Dynamic human robot versus Elon Musk's human robot. So here, let me get this on screen. Where is it? Where is it? Okay. Here we come. This is the Boston Dynamics robot.
It's going pretty slow on my screen. Maybe it's the Zoom capacity, but I looked at it on the actual article and it really was impressive the way this thing,
Yes.
It makes you think they should implement some robotic Olympics. The
Oh,
gymnastics,
wouldn't that be a good thing to do? I love the flip.
yeah, the gymnastics would be fabulous if they could.
So anyway, there we have the Boston Dynamics robot. And here we have the Elon Musk robot.
Elon's robot would be good in an old folks home because it's already got the shuffle.
Yeah, that's right. So the Tesla robot still looks a little early for not ready for production. Tesla is actually pretty famous for announcing products before he has them. That's certainly something that I've heard of from Silicon Valley. We would call it vaporware. So I think that's a vapor robot. And we did see there the Tesla robot was able to walk and carry a box. Wow, the Boston Dynamics robot was able to dance, do flips, and do gymnastics. So I think Tesla has a little bit of catching up to do yet.
But Tesla say theirs is going to cost under $20,000 because of mass production. But I looked for the price of that Boston Dynamics one and couldn't find it. But they do have a dog named Spot that they'll sell for $75,000. And
Right.
the dog is quite capable if you've seen the
Right,
videos.
I've seen things. Right, Boston Dynamics stuff is pricey, but it's going to win the robot Olympics.
Yeah. The other thing that I saw was they say that the non-humanoid robots will become more evident long before the humanoid ones
Right,
do.
right.
And there's already restaurants in Palm Desert that use these robot waitresses. And what it is a kind of a wheeled cart with drawers in it. And the chef or the kitchen put the entrees or the meals in the drawers, and then the cart runs out into the dining room and goes to the right table and tells people which drawer to open to get their dinner.
hmm
And
There,
it's supposed to be cheaper than a waitress and more reliable and doesn't demand overtime and so on.
but I'm not going to flirt with that waitress.
No, or tip it very much either.
Yeah, there's another restaurant serving waitress that I've heard about that is basically on a track.
Yeah, well, in Japan, we used to go into these sushi restaurants, and they had a kind of a train track with saucers on it,
Oh, of course,
and
we've seen those. Yes,
the items would come by, and you just lift it off the track, whichever one you wanted.
yes, yes. I've also seen them with boats going in a little river.
Yeah.
Once at a restaurant like that, I decided to test the environment and I put a quarter on a boat and watched it happen. And then in a while, there were other quarters there. It built up. And once it was over $1, then it didn't make it all the way around again.
The other thing that I saw was that Japan is very much ahead of the rest of us in terms of these robots for old folks'
Oh,
homes
yes, yes,
or
indeed.
care facilities.
Or
Now,
at home, no care facility, the robot assistant for the person living alone.
yeah, and a lot of times these robots do more of the monitoring type
Right.
work than
Yes.
the actual work. But you can imagine a situation where instead of having that weekly hand shower by a young Swedish lady, they probably strap you into a wheelchair and run you through a car wash or something like that.
Yes. Now, also in Japan, one of the devices they have is a toilet that is online that is doing some kind of measurement. And one of the reasons that's good for old people is if grandma doesn't go to the toilet today, it may mean that she has a problem and somebody needs
Yeah.
to look in on her.
If it's more than a week, you have to do something about it.
That's right. Okay. So next up, we have the climate chaos. We're in a race between Armageddon and awesome. And to try to put this in perspective, they start saying every one of us will love someone who's still alive in 2100. And the loved one will either face a world in which climate chaos is there or a clean green utopia. And that depends on what we do today. There are lots of bad news that we get about climate, but there are tangible reasons for optimism. Uh, the real case, though, is yet emissions still have yet to start falling, and to uh, be with the international plans on climate, emissions not only have to fall, but they need to be cut in half by 2030 to be on the plan. and that's an extreme change. They say the situation is still far from hopeless. One of the reasons is the exponential growth in these green solutions. And they say because of that, there is a clear path to limiting the damage. The question is how fast we can travel along it. I think that's the same question we've been talking about for a while. They say we have pretty much everything we need in terms of technology, and most of these solutions that are coming actually have a significant benefit to our health and well-being and maybe the standard of living around the world. One of the things that is the most promising is the exponential growth of ever cheaper renewable energy. And this renewable energy now is 75% of the new power that's being installed around the world is the renewable energy. And there are recent studies that I've talked about that say this swift transition to clean energy would save literally trillions of dollars. Uh, Part of it is the rapid adoption of the electric vehicles. One sign of how they're growing is in China, which is the place where there's the highest EV sales in the world. EV sales doubled from last year. So while the US and Europe, the sales are going up, in China, they are doubling year on year. And the thing and the barrier is that we really have to change massive pieces of the global economy to do this. And these changes are affect millions of people, and our change on that scale is not easy. But if you look at it around the world, the big four, that is the US, China, India, and the EU, are all taking significant action. One of the things that I've been noticing is the kind of action that is happening in China, and this is very encouraging. It is also the increasing number of climate-driven extreme weather disasters is an important catalyst for change because it makes it easy to see that whatever are the problems, they're starting to affect us now in real life. And there had been concern about Ukraine, but as people look at Ukraine, there are short-term problems where they're pumping more gas, but for the long term, more countries are saying they need to convert to renewables for strategic reasons. One of the things that is happening in China is accelerating their plans for renewables because they don't want to be dependent on the energy that they're purchasing from overseas. Right now, we've heard about China purchasing uh, gas and oil from Russia, but one of the places that the Chinese are dependent upon is LPG from the USA. And China doesn't want to be dependent upon America for their energy. And so around the world, countries are saying we don't want to be held hostage. And so this is accelerating the changes that are already going on. Another positive thing is there's a powerful voice for action that is coming from the younger people. they're the one who are going to have to live the consequences, and it doesn't look like they're happy about it. So they are creating political pressure for action. There's also pressure building in the consumer area. One thing that they talked about that I thought was very interesting is online searches in Google for plant-based diets have increased by 90% in the last year. And so this is an example of people trying to figure out how to make life choices that are more sustainable. In the case of my wife and I, this is a change that we have made where we still have meat, but it's probably a third of the meat that we had a couple of years ago. And we have many days where the main meals are entirely plant-based, and it doesn't seem to have negative effects on our health, and it's good food. So there are problems, but there is optimism, and I sure hope the good guys win.
Yeah, but the soundbite media are still unduly alarmist, and that's their business, to sell an audience.
That's
to
right. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, but I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Bjorn Lundberg. He's a Danish fellow who talks about these issues and talks about the transitions to a lower carbon future. But one of the real issues is that only about 1/4 of the fossil fuel usage goes into producing electricity. The other 3/4 goes into various industrial processes and residential heating and all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
There's a lot of other substitutions that are necessary to eliminate fossil fuels. But the reality is the climate change isn't as huge a problem as these alarmist media types would have us believe. It's not Armageddon, for instance. It's not the end of the world. And it's like they say, people we know are going to be alive 75 years from now, and they're going to be dealing with it.
Well, I think this year with, the question I have about this year, we've had a lot of events and people talk about it. Is it weather or is it climate? In the case, for example, with the hurricane that hit Florida, the hurricanes that are coming into the US now, there are two changes that have happened that sure seem to be climate based. One is because the oceans are hotter, they carry more energy, so they have higher levels of wind. And also, I don't know why this is, but as they go over land masses, like when the hurricane was crossing Florida, they don't move as fast over the land mass. So the damage they cause is made worse by the fact that they're staying in the same place longer. Anyway, so we're seeing stuff going on that I think is climate change, not just the normal perturbations in weather. Anyway, certainly the media makes a story out of it. I think still I'm not unhappy to see the stories because as we go through a lot of these things, what we hear is we know what to do. We just have to have the public will to do it.
And maybe there's an element of you have to overplay it to get people to act even
Maybe,
partially.
maybe. You know,
Like so much of
you have
so
to
much
break
of
the inertia.
yeah, so much of the reduction could come from simple things like home insulation and upgrading of home heating systems.
And replacing the heaters with I'm temporarily drawing a blank for the name of the new kind of heaters that are much more efficient, heat pumps.
Yeah.
Anyway, now the next story is a space story, and I think this is pretty cool. This is a giant slingshot to put them into orbit. Let's take a look at the pictures. And here I've started this in the middle.
1,000 mile per hour. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take off! Obviously, very impressive sort of capability, very outside the box thinking. And I saw that throughout everybody we talked to here at Spin Launch. They're thinking about non-traditional challenges.
It's been a journey, and today we accomplished our 10th test flight, and it has proven that it is a system that is repeatably reliable. This is not a rocket, and clearly our ability to, in just less than 11 months, perform this many tests and have them all function as planned really is a testament to the nature of the technology.
So it's a slingshot. This is an early model of it. The one that they will end up with will be 3 times bigger. It accelerates the load to 5,000 miles an hour, which is pretty fast, and then shoots it up into space. Once it gets into the near Earth orbit area, then they have a rocket to do the final positioning. So it's not entirely by the slingshot. So it's a little bit of a hybrid here. And right now, the present one is 100 feet wide, and it'll launch its load up to 25,000 feet. The final version, they say, will be 3 times bigger and launch its payload as high as 200,000 feet, and it will launch a load of a couple of hundred kilos. So it's not a trivial load, it's not a giant load. What they think the particular niche that they see for this device is there are a new generation of small, tiny, inexpensive satellites that are called chipsats. CHIPSATS, that will be small centimeter scale spacecraft that are mainly instrumentation measuring devices. And so how they anticipate using them is they will throw them up into space with this device, and then they will descend into the atmosphere and take measurements with their instruments as they come down. So it's a new way of gathering spatially distributed data sets and information about the atmosphere and what you can observe in space. And part of what is appealing to me about it is this is like some of the stuff that I read in science fiction 50 years ago. And here now we have the slingshot that'll just throw you in orbit. By the way, the slingshot doesn't use nearly as much fuel or energy or anything like that. And so it's a cleaner way to launch. I think they're going to have to be pretty big before they're launching humans, though.
Well, and humans couldn't tolerate the high G loads
Yes,
that the
absolutely.
payload.
Yeah,
But
one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, it's just one of the things about this slingshot idea is they could put the energy into the payload without having to put the energy into the rocket or all the
Right.
other heavy stuff that goes with
Yes.
the payload, the
Yes.
fuel and whatever.
Yes,
Because
one of the parts of this test, by the way, is this test that we saw there used actual sample payloads, and part of what they were testing was, can this stuff endure the G forces and still continue to work? And that was an important part of the test, is it didn't break the rocket or the payload.
yeah. And with a normal rocket, you have to accelerate the weight of all that fuel to a high
Oh, yes.
velocity as well. And
Yes.
that takes a lot of the rocket's fuel goes to accelerate itself, not the
Yes.
payload.
Yes. So they're trying different things. And, one of the things that I know is that in periods like this, there are going to be new solutions that happen. You don't know what's going to win. Something's going to win, but you don't know what. And it's good that they're trying different things, I think. So something's going to be the winning solution, or a winning solution. The other thing that's happening in the space business, it's becoming a big, varied business. So there are a lot of niches for different kind of launch vehicles. Okay, now the Earth has a microbiome, and microbial life represents the largest share of the Earth's biodiversity. And there is now an emerging realization that the Earth's microbial biodiversity is under threat in cases. Now, what they have found is that restoring native soil microbiomes restores biomass production by 64% on average. So one of the things that you can do, for example, in your farm or in your forest that you're raising, to improve their ability to grow and pull carbon out of the air and make more wood or make more fruit or vegetables, is to enrich the microbiome in the plants. Right now, the estimates for Earth's biodiversity include 5 to 7 million different animals, 500,000 plants, 6 million to 8 million fungi, and 1 trillion prokaryotes. These are microscopic critters. And this Earth microbiome represents the majority of Earth's biodiversity and the majority of Earth's living mass. It's not us people on top of the Earth that are the mass, it's the critters within the Earth. And of course, microbial life was the first to inhabit our planet and will live longer than us. Evidence of the risks of the microbiome Uh, one place that it comes in Europe, they have been monitoring uh, mushroom formation for the last 100 years. And what they have seen is a 45% decline in mushroom forming in Europe over the last 100 years. They think it has to do with land use and nitrogen pollution and things like that, but a 45% decrease in one kind of our microbiome is certainly enough to make people alarmed. And so with the microbiome, we're dependent upon it with our symbiotic relationship with our body. We're also dependent upon it in all the various symbiotic relationships on the planet. So take care of your microbiome and it'll take care of you. Okay. And coming up next is a money story. And the ultra rich defend and justify their low tax rates with several stories. You've heard all of these stories, and it turns out that these stories are not true. And right now, as a result of this, a record share of the nation's wealth is in the hands of billionaires who pay a lower tax rate. A recent Congressional Budget Office study looked at the distribution of wealth between 1989 and 2019 over this last 30 years. And what they found is the richest 1% of the family increased their share of the total national wealth from 27% to 34%. That's a fairly significant increase. Families in the bottom half of the economy now hold 2%. So we have the 1% with 34%, and we have the 50% with 2%. Now the ultra wealthy justify their wealth and their low tax rate by using three stories. The first is trickle down economics. Remember that? Well, they still are using it. And since the time of Reagan, uh, for the last 40 years, wealth at the top has soared and almost nothing has trickled down. The median wage today is basically what it was 40 years ago. So if it's trickling down, it's not getting to any of the people. So that's one. The second myth is the myth of the free market. You know, that's a fundamental myth in America, it seems like. And in the reality, the ultra wealthy have rigged the free money, the free market, to their own benefit. One of the ways they do it is with campaign contributions. Campaign contributions in the last 10 years have risen from 31 million in the 2010 election to 1.2 billion in the most recent presidential cycle. And, you know, what are the rich guys getting for their money? They're getting tax cuts and freedom to monopolize markets and government bailouts. And so the free market is not free and it is wired to favor the wealthy. The third myth is the myth that they deserve all of this because they're superior human beings. You know, and if you have any questions about that, just ask Elon Musk and he will confirm how superior he is, I believe. And they portray themselves as self-made, rugged individuals who did it on their own. And so they deserve their billions. And it turns out 6 of the 10 wealthiest Americans alive today are heirs to fortunes passed on by their wealthy ancestors, and others had advantages that come from wealthy parents. For example, Jeff Bezos, we've heard about how he started his business in the garage, and look at it now. What they generally don't say is that his startup was funded by a $250,000 investment from his parents. And another example of a self-made man, Bill Gates. Bill Gates' mother had connections with IBM, and she used her connections to help him make the deal that put Microsoft on the map. Elon Musk came from a family that had wealth from shares of a diamond, an emerald mine rather, in South Africa. And so don't lionize the ultra rich as superior self-made human beings who deserve their billions. They were lucky and had connections. Again, I worked in Silicon Valley, and some of the people I knew were exactly of this class, and they tended to think that they had the success because of their own brilliance, and they deserved all the success they have. And I knew plenty of other people just as skilled, just as capable, but didn't have the particular set of family power and good fortune that these other guys had. When I spoke to my Silicon Valley friends about, well, what is the factor of luck and timing that was a part of your wealth? What I heard from them is, oh no, it didn't have anything to do with it. It was all me because I'm so great.
I saw a cute phrase that said that we're becoming a world of have-nots and have-yachts.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought that was cute.
Yes, indeed. No, I didn't have it here, but one of the things I had in the longer article was 118-foot, $25 million combination luxury yacht and submarine. It would go down to 650 feet.
Well, maybe that's some of the trickle-down stuff.
Yes, I believe so.
It should be noted that the author of the article is not exactly a right winger, shall we say. Robert Raich is pretty
Right.
left wing, and I say that just for full disclosure. Actually, I agree with everything he says.
Right.
But it is written from a kind of a left wing perspective.
And certainly he's a left-wing economist. I'm still not sure in general how leftist economists are as a class, but anyway, yes,
you can interpret that economic data any way you want and come out either right or left, trickle down versus bottom up. So
Well, I keep waiting for the trickle.
Yeah.
Now, the next story, I think, is a related story because it really is about money and wealth and uh, these kind of things in America. And a new analysis was done that finds that immigrants, including those with less than a high school degree, provide big financial benefits and a subsidy to U.S. taxpayers. This is exactly opposed to at least the conservative view of immigrants, which are these unskilled people who eat up resources, but in fact, they immigrants are a net positive for U.S. taxpayers. This new estimate included one thing that was not in previous estimates, which was an estimate of the tax revenue from capital income that was caused by the immigrant workers' presence in the economy. So what they looked at is more fully what are the impacts of the immigrants, and there's a significant impact in tax revenue. And what the study said is a recent immigrant without a high school degree causes a lifetime positive net uh, fiscal balance of $128,000. So again, instead of using money, he contributes $128,000 to uh, income in government revenues. And if you include his expected children and grandchildren that are going to come after them, the net effect is more than $300,000. So this is a different view of the impact of immigrants, and it was done well enough that it may start to work its way into government estimates. I don't think it's ever going to work its way into the right wing because they need to have somebody to demonize, and they look for others, and nobody is as much an other as immigrants, you know? They didn't even grow up here. And so if you looked at it in this way, they say the Trump administration's reducing refugee admissions into the U.S. cost the U.S. economy about $10 billion a year. And so it is not a benefit. And of course, as education levels go up, the benefit of that immigrant is greater.
Well, perhaps there should be a differentiation between immigrants and illegals. And I think the Republicans are down on illegals more than they're down on immigrants.
But they're also down on people who are claiming refugee status and all kind of things.
Yeah. Immigrants typically have more self-reliance and less self-esteem than the pampered children of successful parents.
Uh-huh.
And immigrants typically just want a paying job, where the millennials typically want a paying position and forgiveness of their student loans.
So now I have a couple of medical stories, and the first one is about at-home testing, home medical tests. Because of COVID and the at-home test for COVID-19, there has more and more evidence that self-tests, home tests, can be reliable and useful. And it looks like we may be on our way to a new era in healthcare where a variety of home tests become a part of the system. There are a number of these home tests that are in development now. Some of them are because of stigmas. One of the areas where there are home tests being developed are for sexually transmitted diseases because there is a stigma to getting these diseases. So if you have your home test, you can find out you got the clap or something, and you don't have to be ashamed that that is known at your doctor's office. You still have to figure out how to treat it though. And from a consumer standpoint, there also is a desire to monitor what is happening internally. And this goes beyond infectious diseases. Is this group of consumers now that are data-driven biohackers. And what they want to know is they want to have information, detailed information about things like vitamin levels and things like this. There also are tests for women's health markers like thyroid levels and diabetes tests. And there are ethical problems with these testings too. Some of the home tests are tests to screen for cancer. And what they have found is that if you're testing a large number of people without symptoms, this can increase their anxiety, and a false negative will give you follow-up testing that you have to do that may not contribute to anything. It costs you money and isn't saving your life necessarily, but it makes you worried about it. So there are issues with the home testing too. Some of the tests that they have now, like there is a flu test that is only 50 or 60% accurate. So that absolutely is an issue with the home tests, is how good they are. But there are lots of companies now that have accelerated their development, and there is going to be a big market that starts to happen for them. I have an example of some of the products from Abbott Labs. They have a home test for 4 different STDs. For another company, Aliva, with their product Be Well, gives infectious diseases, including influenza and COVID. Another company has a metabolic and hormonal testing kit, so they can test ovary syndromes and other conditions. Another one has an AI-driven Alzheimer's diagnosis test. Then we have influenza tests, COVID tests, respiratory disease tests. Then there is a company, Everlywell, which makes many home tests for things like vitamin levels and heavy metals and food allergies. Another company has a home test for kidney disease. Another test, a couple of companies have home tests to test your sperm and sperm counts. Another one, I wonder how you give that particular home test the sample that they need. Another company has a home test that does the routine blood work test that you'd have done at the lab. So one of the things that is happening to medicine because of COVID-19, one part that we know is happening more now than it was is remote medicine, where the doctors will deal with you via phone or computer while you're staying at home. And here with these home test kits, then that gives you the ability to do some of the medical testing without ever leaving your home.
Well, there's a lot of upside here, but of course, like the article says, it's complicated by all of the regulatory and criminal opportunities that it might create. But I like the idea of having one of those dogs that can smell your breath and tell you what's wrong with you.
That's
How
right.
and maybe Boston Dynamics can adapt their spot to do that. And
Now, the problem you need with a dog that can smell you and know what's wrong with you is you need to have your AI dog translators so you can speak to the dog and he can tell you.
yeah, it gets expensive.
Uh-huh.
I think most people don't appreciate that a lot of these tests are available at home tests, and you can buy them. The problem is some of them require a doctor's prescription for you to get them. Some require meters, which cost a lot of money.
Right.
A little bit of training. I've used various meters. I do a glucose blood sugar test once a week with the meter that I have, and I used to check my blood thinner, how good my blood thinning was doing with another meter. That meter cost my insurance company $1,000. So, and I also had an occasion to have to look into drug testing for a company, and I found that you can buy kits for drug testing. They sell them to companies, but individuals can buy them if you pretend like you're a company, or there's ways around that. But what was interesting is the test kit for drugs. It came with about I don't know, depending on how many drugs you were testing for, 5 or 6 or 10 tubes. And you get a blood test and you put a drop in each tube.
Okay.
That's what the labs do sometimes too.
Right.
They just put a drop of blood in a tube and see what color it turns. That's what they're doing on the street. Police do that to check for cocaine or whatever.
Okay.
So the big problem is it costs a lot of money, and some of these tests cost a lot of money because they're scarce. There isn't a big demand for them, and the meters themselves can be expensive.
And the company is not going to offer a test unless they can make a profit on it.
True. You can, if the test is available to your doctor or to your lab, you might be able to find it online to do it yourself.
And like you say, some of the tests require the sample for you to send a sample to the lab or something like that, so they don't have the ability to get immediate results at your home. But anyway, it's an interesting area, and it moves at least the medical monitoring out of the lab in the doctor's office into our home. And I think that's a trend that we're going to see more and more in the future, because the care at a doctor's office is so expensive.
And they don't want you in there. Just spread your germs around.
That's right. Just send them your money and don't go in the office.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, do a video. The one thing I've been having these video and audio conferences with my doctor. They're a lot cheaper. I'm not paying a copay when she calls me.
Right. That's very good. So it's
Yeah.
a more effective way. You also don't have to get stuck in traffic.
And the video conferencing, they can see you. They can see how you're acting. It's
Mhm.
like an office visit, but it's a free one. So
Right.
I'm a believer.
Well, the future might not be so bad.
Right.
I worked with a guy whose wife was an FBI agent, and her whole career was working with medical fraud and doctors that abuse the Medicare system in the US. And there were doctors that were billing millions of dollars
Yes.
falsely to Medicare and getting the money.
Yes.
And so it's hard to imagine, but it's a big business.
Yes. I think there was some recent case where some group of doctors hit up Medicare or some other federal aid program for something like $300 million.
And isn't there a big court case on now in the US about that company that was going to revolutionize the testing world?
Oh, right.
It was
I,
a woman from
right.
San Francisco or something.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what happened about that, but
Well, as I say, going through Silicon Valley, I saw some of these things worked and some of them didn't. And some of them made people rich and some of them made people poor.
yeah, they make a few people rich or a lot of people poor.
Right. Okay, so the last story for today is about end of life planning and confronting the fact that our loved ones are going to die someday or that we're going to die someday is one of the hardest parts of being human. And so if you avoid this, it increases the likelihood that we'll be unprepared for what is coming. We'll be unprepared to make particularly the medical decisions when we need to make them. And if we're forced to make choices for an incapacitated loved one, or we have loved ones who are making those choices for us, and if we don't know what they want, we may have problems feeling like we're making the right decision. So it's worthwhile to actually talk to people about it and have this conversation. For us, what I've found is important is having the conversation with my own children saying, hey, I'm going to die. They don't like that conversation, but when I have done it, I've felt a sense of relief from them for getting the subject on the table. Now, this article is written from the point of view of a younger person dealing with one of their older people. And, uh, you know, these are important conversations to have, but most people don't feel ready to have these conversations. And so the article gives some advice about doing it. One of the important things is before you have the conversation, to think about it, to think about what you want, what kind of outcome you would like to have from the conversation. And there's a lot of stuff to think about. And in the first conversation, you should not focus on things like wills or inheritance or properties. It's better to focus on more general issues and gauging whether the person you're talking to is actually open to talk about it. And if they're open to talk about it, it's good to talk about what they want from the end of their life and the kind of planning that they've already done, and to sort out how uh, they can best support you or how you can best support them. And if you're trying to have this conversation, it's easier to talk about how you want to live your life through the end instead of starting with how you want to die. The bigger question is, how do you want to live your life? And to start getting people thinking about their values and what is important to them. The ideal emphasis is on living well through the end. I think that's something that we all are interested in. And, figure out how to have the conversation. There's no perfect way to start it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Uh, and be prepared to actually listen while you're having the conversation. Let me ask you guys, have you talked to your children or younger people in the family about the fact that you're going to die?
Well, I'll tell you what I did. I made up a spreadsheet listing all my books and tools and other junk that we all accumulate great quantities of that our kids don't want, and gave it to my daughter. And the spreadsheet lists all these things with the names and contact info for some of my acquaintances and friends who might like the stuff. So that like the stuff that the kids don't want. So it was our way to kind of inoculate them with the idea that the time would come when they had to disperse all this stuff, and this list would help them do that.
Well, that was still a focus on the stuff aspect of it, but not much focus, it sounds like, on what you want out of life until you're gone.
No. The other thing I joke about is that my wife uncharacteristically gave me a piece of nice jewelry last Christmas. It was an engraved bracelet, but the jeweler got my initials on it wrong. He put the initials DNR on it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
How about you, Chad? Have you talked to your folks about your dying?
No, I haven't. My wife and I have talked about it, and we have our healthcare. Can't read that, of course, but we have our instructions and have given them to our doctor, and on this, they asked to identify, who they go to. If my wife Tony isn't available, then they go to my son. But I've given these to those people, so at least it's all in place intellectually, maybe not in place emotionally.
Right. And my own experience is the emotional component of it is a big deal. At least it was with my own kids. A couple of years ago, when my daughter and her partner were visiting me in Mexico, I had decided that I was going to talk to her about it. My wife was concerned about the conversation because that's a conversation people don't like to have. And so she didn't want me to drive my daughter away by talking about it. But when I talked about it, not only did I see this sense of relief in my daughter's partner had a parent who had died in a couple of years before that, and the parent died without any discussion of any of this stuff. And she was just so grateful that I was talking about it and, creating the space for us to, have this as something that was within our relationship and something we could deal with and something we didn't have to be afraid to talk about. My first experience actually was with my mother. I was with her visiting her parents, and one day I saw that she was upset, and I went out in the car with her so we could talk privately. And she said she was so uh, sad. Her parents were getting older, and this might be the last time she ever uh, saw them and things like this. And I asked my mother, who was a therapist, did you ever talk to them about it? And of course, she said no. And we got back to her house, and she got them all together, and we're sitting around at a table, and she said that she and I were talking about this, and there was something that we needed to talk to her about it. And then she said to me, "Would you tell them, Richie?" But after that, I have a photograph of my mother, and her face was the clearest emotionally that I've ever seen her. And of course, when we talked to her parents about feelings that they were going to die, they knew they were going to die. It wasn't news to them. Anyway, so my suggestion is that this is hard emotional work because it's dealing with stuff that we don't like to face. But so my experience with it is it has been some of the most worthwhile conversations I've ever had with the people that I care about.
Good, let's all resolve to do a little more in that direction.
Mhm. And what I would suspect from my own kids is they know you're getting older too, and they have these concerns that they may not have expressed. And the thing to do is to talk about it, get it on the table, make it be something you could talk about. And when you talk about it, it's not going to just happen once. When you start it, you open the door, and the conversation develops over the years. Okay. Well, now that we've dealt with life and death and slingshot rockets, then it's good to see you all and see you next week.
Thank you.
Adios.
Yeah,
Adios.
thanks very much.